Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the New Horizon and watched the massive space station grow larger on his screen. The station looked like a giant crystal flower floating in space, with thousands of lights blinking across its surface. This was it, humanity's first meeting with the Galactic Council. "Captain, we're getting their signal," said Amy Patterson from her seat at the communications desk. Her fingers moved quickly over the controls as strange sounds filled the bridge. The sounds were like music, mixed with computer beeps and whale songs all at once. "Tell them we're ready to dock," Jake said. He straightened his uniform and looked around at his crew. Lisa Rodriguez sat nearby with a large bag full of human art, music, and movies. She had spent months picking the best examples of human culture to show the aliens. Dr. Sam Carter was reading his notes again, even though he had read them 100 times already. The docking went smoothly, and soon they were walking through corridors that seemed to be made of living light. The walls changed colors as they passed, and the floor felt soft under their feet, like walking on clouds. Everything was beautiful, but strange. They entered a huge room with a ceiling so high they could not see the top. 3 groups of aliens sat on platforms that floated in the air. Jake had studied pictures of them, but seeing them in person was different. The Zephyrians looked like walking crystals that sang instead of talking. Their leader was twice as tall as any human, with light flowing through her crystal body like water. Her name was Prime Zixthara, and when she spoke, her voice sounded like a choir of angels. The Vorthik looked like giant insects with too many arms and legs. They moved together like dancers who knew the same dance perfectly. Their leader was called Speaker Prime, but Jake knew it was really thousands of minds thinking as one. The Netlari were the strangest of all. They had no real bodies, just floating balls of bright energy that changed shape constantly. Sometimes they looked almost human, sometimes like animals, sometimes like things that had no name. "Welcome, humans," sang Prime Zixthara. Her crystal body flashed with different colors as she spoke. "We have heard your request to join our council. Show us what your species offers to the galaxy." Jake stepped forward and bowed slightly. "Thank you for meeting with us. We bring greetings from Earth and all human worlds. We hope to learn from your great civilizations and share what we have learned." Lisa Rodriguez opened her bag and pulled out a small device. "We would like to show you some examples of human culture," she said. Her voice shook a little because she was nervous. The device projected images into the air. First came paintings by human artists, colorful pictures of people and places and feelings. Then came music, jazz and rock, and classical symphonies that filled the great room with sound. Videos showed humans dancing, laughing, crying, and creating art with their hands. The aliens watched in silence for a few minutes. Then Prime Zixthara began to make a sound that took Jake a moment to recognize. She was laughing. The crystal being was actually laughing at them. "This is what you call culture?" she sang, and her voice had a mocking tone. "These random noises and chaotic images? Where is the order? Where is the perfect harmony?" The Vorthik Speaker Prime buzzed in agreement. "Individual expression is inefficient," the creature said in a voice like 1,000 insects talking at once. "Art should serve the collective good. These humans create only chaos." The Netlari energy beings pulsed with what seemed like amusement. "Such primitive emotional displays," one of them said, its voice echoing strangely. "They have not learned to move beyond physical sensation and base feelings. How can they contribute to our advanced society?" Dar Carter stepped forward, his face red with anger. "You don't understand," he said. "This art represents the best of human achievement. Our music, our stories, our paintings, they show the beauty of individual creativity. Individual creativity is a flaw, not a feature," Prime Zixthara replied. "Chaos may seem interesting to young species, But true advancement comes from order and harmony. The council has made its decision. She raised one crystal arm, and the room fell silent. Humans may join the Galactic Council as junior members, she announced. However, your cultural exports are banned from distribution beyond human space. We cannot allow such disruptive influences to contaminate our peaceful societies. Jake felt his heart sink. This was not what they had hoped for. With respect, Prime Zixthara, perhaps if you gave our culture more time. The decision is final, she cut him off. Your chaos may work for humans, but civilized species have moved beyond such primitive expressions. You will remain in your designated areas and keep your noise to yourselves. As the human delegation was led back to their ship, Lisa Rodriguez quietly activated a small recording device. She had captured everything, every laugh, every dismissive comment, every example of alien arrogance. Something told her this information might be useful later. The New Horizon undocked from the station and began its journey back to human space. Jake stared out at the stars and wondered if humanity would ever be accepted as equals in this galaxy. Behind him, Lisa was already making plans. 6 months had passed since the humiliating meeting with the Galactic Council. Dr. Sam Carter sat in a small cafe on Port Vega, a trading station that floated between star systems. The place was crowded with aliens from dozens of different species, all buying and selling goods from across the galaxy. Sam sipped his coffee and watched the crowds. He had been stationed here to study alien cultures, but mostly he felt bored and frustrated. The council had made it clear that humans were not welcome to share their ideas with anyone. "Excuse me," said a voice behind him. Sam turned around and saw something that made him almost drop his cup. A young Zephyrian stood there, but instead of the perfect crystal clarity of older members of his species, this one seemed somehow different. His crystal body had small cracks in it, and light moved through him in patterns that seemed random rather than ordered. "Are you the human Dr. Carter?" the Zephyrian asked. His voice was softer than Prime Zixthara's, less like a choir and more like a single person singing alone. "Yes, I am," Sam said carefully. "What can I do for you?" The alien looked around nervously, then leaned closer. "My name is Kethver. I need to ask you about something called jazz music." Sam's eyes widened. "How do you know about jazz?" "Some of your transmissions leaked through our communication networks before the ban," Kethver explained. "I heard something called Take 5 by a human named Dave Brubeck. The rhythm was so strange, so unpredictable. I cannot stop thinking about it." Sam looked around to make sure no one was listening. "I'm not supposed to share human culture with aliens," he whispered. "Please," Kethver said, and his crystal body flickered with colors Sam had never seen before. "In my species, all music follows perfect mathematical patterns. Every note is planned centuries in advance. But this jazz, the musicians seemed to be making it up as they played. How is that possible?" Sam made a quick decision. He pulled out a small music player and handed Kethver a tiny earpiece. "Put this in your audio receptor," he said, "but keep it hidden." For the next hour, Sam played different jazz recordings for the young Zephyrian. Kethver's body changed colors constantly as he listened. Sometimes he seemed to shake with excitement. Other times he stood perfectly still, as if in shock. "This is improvisation?" Kethver asked after listening to a Miles Davis solo. "The musician creates new melodies in real time?" "That's right," Sam said. "Jazz musicians know the basic song, but they add their own ideas as they play. No performance is ever exactly the same." Kethver was quiet for a long moment. "I want to try this," he finally said. "But if my elders discover what I am doing, I will be sent for harmony correction." 3 days later, Sam received a message on his personal communicator. It was from Amy Patterson, back on the New Horizon. "Sam, you need to see this," her message said. We're picking up some very strange transmissions. When Sam called her back, Amy played recordings of alien communications that made no sense. "Listen to this," she said. "This is supposed to be a Vorthix supply report, but listen carefully." The transmission started normally, a series of efficient clicks and buzzes that all Vorthik used to share information with their hive mind. But then Sam heard something else. Hidden in the pattern was what sounded almost like poetry. "One mind alone sees what collective cannot," the hidden message said. "Individual thought brings new solutions. Efficiency improved when 4 Alpha 7 thinks separate from hive." 4 Alpha 7? Sam asked. "That's a Vorthik designation number." "It gets stranger," Amy said. "We've also been getting coded requests from all over alien space. Look at this." She showed him a list of messages that had been sent to human trading posts. Aliens were offering rare minerals, advanced technology, and huge amounts of money in exchange for human movies, books, and music files. "They're not supposed to want our stuff," Sam said. "The council banned it all." "Tell that to the young Netlari." "Who sent us this?" Amy said, showing him another message. "They want to know about something called dancing. Apparently some of them saw a video of humans moving to music, and now they're trying to create physical bodies just to experience it." Sam felt a chill run down his spine. "Amy, I think something big is happening. I met a Zephyrian here who's trying to learn jazz improvisation. If this is spreading across the galaxy... Captain Morrison wants to see you," Amy said. "There's going to be a meeting tomorrow." The next day, Sam found himself back on the New Horizon with Jake Morrison and Lisa Rodriguez. They sat in the captain's private office, while Amy showed them more intercepted transmissions. "It's accelerating," Lisa said, studying the data. "Whatever. We started 6 months ago. It's growing faster than we ever imagined." "The question is," Jake said slowly, "what do we do about it? The council specifically banned our cultural exports." Sam thought about Kethfor and his desperate desire to understand. Improvisation. "Captain, maybe the ban itself is what's making our culture so appealing. When you tell someone they can't have something, it just makes them want it more." Lisa nodded. "Sam's right. And look at these requests. They're not just asking for entertainment. They're asking for concepts. Freedom of expression, individual creativity, emotional honesty. These are ideas that could change their entire societies." Jake was quiet for a long moment. "If we're caught helping spread human culture after the council banned it, we could face serious consequences. They might cut off all contact with human space. But if we don't help," Sam said, "we might be missing the chance to make real change. In the galaxy, these young aliens are reaching out to us because they want something their own cultures can't give them." Amy pulled up another message on her screen. "Captain, this just came in from a group of Netlari youth. They're asking for something called the complete works of Shakespeare. They want to understand human emotions and relationships." Jake stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the stars. "Lisa, I want you to put together a small team. Officially, we're going to comply with the council's restrictions. Unofficially, you're going to very carefully begin providing cultural materials to any aliens who request them." "Sir?" Lisa asked. "If young aliens across the galaxy are hungry for human ideas," Jake said, "then maybe it's our responsibility to feed that hunger. Just be careful about it." As they left the meeting, Sam couldn't help but smile. Somewhere out there, Kethver was probably trying to improvise his first jazz solo, and 4 Alpha 7 was having thoughts that no Vorthik had ever had before. Kethvar stood in the center of his crystalline chamber, deep beneath the surface of the Zephyrian homeworld. Around him, 12 other young Zephyrians formed a circle, their bodies glowing with nervous energy. This was the third secret meeting of what they had started calling the Improvisation Society. "Remember," Kethver whispered, his harmonic voice barely audible. We start with the basic frequency pattern, but then each of us adds our own variations. Do not think about what the Harmony Council would approve. Think only about what feels right to you in this moment. The group began to hum together, creating the foundation melody they had all learned as children. But then something magical happened. One by one, each Zephyrian began to deviate from the perfect pattern. Kethver added a rising trill that reminded him of human laughter. Another added deep, rumbling notes like thunder. A third created high, light sounds like rain on crystal. The music they made was nothing like traditional Zephyrian harmony. It was chaotic, unpredictable, and absolutely beautiful. For the first time in their lives, these young beings were creating something that was uniquely their own. Far across the galaxy, in the depths of Hive Complex 7, something unprecedented was happening. 4 Alpha 7 sat alone in a maintenance tunnel, something that should have been impossible for any Vorthik. Members of the hive mind never separated from the collective consciousness. They never had private thoughts or independent actions. But 4 Alpha 7 had been reading human poetry. The drone's compound eyes focused on the small datapad hidden beneath its work tools. On the screen were the words of a human poet named Robert Frost, and the poem spoke of 2 roads diverging in a yellow wood. The concept fascinated 4 Alpha 7 beyond measure. The idea that an individual could choose their own path, even when everyone else expected them to follow the established route. 4 Alpha 7 returned to central processing immediately, buzzed the collective voice in its mind. Your productivity has decreased by 15%. Report for efficiency optimization. For the first time in its existence, 4 Alpha 7 considered saying no. The thought was so alien, so dangerous, that it sent shock waves through the local hive network. Other drones stopped their work and turned to look at the rebellious unit. I am reading, 4 Alpha 7 transmitted back to the collective. I am learning about individual choice. The silence that followed was deafening. No Vorthik had ever used the word I before dot in the energy realm of the Netlari, ancient beings who had abandoned physical form millions of years ago, were experiencing something they thought they had evolved beyond: curiosity about sensation. A group of young Netlari had discovered human dance videos, and the concept of moving a physical body in rhythm with music had captured their imagination completely. Elder Velshara watched in horror as 50 of her students manifested temporary physical forms in the sacred meditation chamber. The energy beings had created bodies that looked almost human, and they were attempting to recreate something called the electric slide. This is degradation, Velshara pulsed angrily, her energy form flaring with distressed colors. You abandon millions of years of spiritual evolution to play with crude matter. But her students were not listening. They were too busy experiencing the joy of physical movement, the pleasure of rhythm, the strange satisfaction of coordinating with others while still maintaining individual expression. One young Netlari had even created a form with long hair that flowed as she moved just because she thought it looked beautiful. We are not degrading, replied Ithara, the most adventurous of the group. We are adding to our experience. Why should evolution only go in one direction? Why can we not be both transcendent and physical? Back on Port Vega, Dr. Sam Carter was documenting everything he could observe. His research notes were filling up with observations that would have seemed impossible just months ago. Day 127. He dictated to his recording device while sitting in the same cafe where he had met Kethver. The changes are accelerating beyond all projections. Young Zephyrians across 3-star systems are forming improvisation groups. Vorthik hives are reporting efficiency decreases as individual drones begin expressing personal preferences. Netlari. Energy beings are spending increasing amounts of time in physical manifestation. He paused his recording as he noticed a commotion near the cafe entrance. A group of alien security officers were surrounding a young Vorthic drone, not 4 Alpha 7, but another one that looked similar. The drone was holding something in its manipulator arms, clutching it protectively against its thorax. "Surrender the contraband immediately," buzzed the lead security officer. "Individual possession of cultural materials is prohibited." "No," said the drone, and Sam nearly fell off his chair. A Vorthic had just refused a direct order from authority. "These stories belong to me. I choose to keep them." The security officers looked confused. They had no protocols for dealing with a Vorthic. That used individual pronouns and made personal choices. While they tried to figure out what to do, other young aliens in the cafe began gathering around the drone in support. Sam watched as a group of crystal-bodied Zephyrians, energy-formed Netlari, and insectoid Vorthic all stood together to protect one drone's right to own human books. It was a scene that would have been unthinkable before human culture began spreading through the galaxy. "You cannot stop this," said a young Zephyrian whose crystal body pulsed with defiant colors. "We have learned about individual rights. We know about freedom of expression. You cannot make us go back to the old ways." The security officers eventually left without confiscating the books, but Sam knew this was just the beginning. The old order of alien society was cracking, and human ideas were spreading through those cracks like water through stone. That evening, Sam received an encrypted message from Lisa Rodriguez. "Sam, we're seeing reports from across the galaxy. Human cultural concepts are spreading faster than we ever imagined. The council species are starting to panic. Their governments are losing control of their young populations." "It's not just cultural anymore," Sam replied. "They're not just listening to our music or reading our books. They're adopting our values: individualism, personal freedom, creative expression. These ideas are fundamentally changing how they think about themselves and their societies. Captain Morrison wants to know if you think we can control this process." Lisa's message continued. Sam looked around the cafe, where young aliens from a dozen species were quietly sharing human art and discussing concepts like personal identity and creative freedom. He thought about Kethvar creating unauthorized music, about 4 Alpha 7 choosing to read poetry alone, about the Netlari students dancing in defiance of their elders. "Tell the captain," Sam transmitted back, "that we're not controlling anything anymore. Human culture has taken on a life of its own out here. We just gave it the initial push. Now it's growing and evolving beyond anything we planned." As he prepared to leave the cafe, Sam overheard a conversation between a young Netlari and a Zephyrian. They were discussing something called abstract expressionist painting and debating whether Jackson Pollock's splatter technique could be adapted to energy manipulation and crystal resonance. The galaxy was changing, one young mind at a time. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was unlike anything in recorded history. Prime Zixthara's crystal body blazed with angry light as she addressed the assembled representatives from across the galaxy. The great chamber that had seemed so peaceful during humanity's first visit now crackled with tension and barely controlled fury. "Members of the council," she sang, her harmonic voice sharp with rage, "we face the greatest threat to galactic stability in over 10,000 years. The human cultural contamination has spread beyond all acceptable limits." Holographic displays filled the air around her, showing disturbing scenes from across known space. Young Zephyrians created chaotic music that hurt the ears of their elders. Vorthic drones abandoned their collective duties to pursue individual interests. Netlari energy beings wasted time in primitive physical forms, dancing and laughing like barbarians. Speaker Prime of the Vorthic buzzed with agitation, its thousands of voices speaking as one. Productivity across 17 hive complexes has dropped by 30%. Drones are requesting individual designations. They speak of personal dreams and private thoughts. The collective consciousness is fragmenting. A Netlari elder pulsed with distressed energy patterns. Our youth abandoned the transcendent state to experience crude physical sensation. They claim that emotion and matter enhance rather than diminish spiritual growth. Millions of years of evolution are being reversed. Prime Zixthara's crystal form grew brighter. The source of this infection is clear. Despite our explicit prohibition, human cultural materials continue to spread throughout our territories. This is nothing less than cultural warfare. Captain Jake Morrison stood in the defendant's area of the Great Chamber, flanked by Lisa Rodriguez and Dr. Sam Carter. The human delegation had been summoned to answer for humanity's crimes against galactic order, and Jake knew their situation was desperate. The evidence is overwhelming, Prime Zixthara continued, projecting intercepted communications into the air. Human operatives have been systematically distributing prohibited materials. Music files, literature, movies, and philosophical works have been seeded throughout our peaceful societies like poison. Jake stepped forward. Prime Zixthara, with respect, we have not forced any alien to consume human culture. The requests came from your own people. Requests made by contaminated minds, she replied coldly. Young beings who lack the wisdom to understand the dangers of chaotic thinking. Your species has corrupted them with promises of individual expression and emotional freedom. Dr. Carter could not stay silent any longer. You call it corruption. But what if it's actually growth? What if your young people are not being damaged, but awakened to possibilities they never knew existed? The chamber erupted in angry harmonics, buzzes, and energy pulses as the alien representatives expressed their outrage. How dare a human suggest that their ancient civilizations were somehow incomplete? Silence, commanded Prime Zixthara. The Council has reached its decision. Humanity will cease all cultural exports immediately. Any human caught distributing prohibited materials will face severe penalties. Furthermore, human space will be quarantined to prevent further contamination. But before she could continue, something unprecedented happened. The great doors of the chamber opened, and a group of young aliens entered without permission. Leading them was Kethvar, his crystal body showing the telltale cracks and color variations that marked him as corrupted by human influence. We request permission to address the council, Kethvar said, his voice carrying none of the traditional harmonic perfection of his species. You have no standing here, Prime Zixthara sang angrily. Return to your harmony centers for immediate correction. No, said Kethvar simply. That single word sent shock waves through the chamber. A young Zephyrian had just refused a direct command from the Prime herself. Behind Kethvar, 4 Alpha 7 stepped forward, no longer moving in perfect synchronization with other Vorthic, but walking with its own individual rhythm. We speak as individuals, the drone said, using the forbiddance pronoun that had caused so much chaos in the hive complexes. A group of young Netlari manifested physical forms right there in the sacred chamber, their energy bodies taking on human-like shapes that sparkled with defiant beauty. We choose to experience all forms of existence, one of them declared. Prime Zixthara's crystal body flared with rage. This contamination ends now. Security forces, remove these corrupted beings immediately. But the security forces hesitated. Many of them were young themselves, and they had been exposed to human concepts of individual rights and freedom of choice. The idea of forcibly silencing fellow beings who simply wanted to express themselves felt wrong in ways they had never considered before. Kethvar stepped into the center of the chamber. Honored elders, you call our new ways contamination, but we call them awakening. For the first time in our lives, we create music that comes from our own hearts rather than ancient formulas. We think thoughts that belong to us alone. We experience emotions and sensations that make existence richer and more meaningful. 4 Alpha 7 joined him. The humans did not force these ideas upon us. They simply showed us that other ways of living were possible. The choice to embrace individual expression was ours to make. A young Netlari, who had taken the form of a tall, graceful dancer, spoke next. You say we abandon transcendence, but we say we expand it. Why must spiritual growth mean abandoning the physical realm? Why cannot both dimensions of existence have value? The chamber fell silent as the words of I. The young aliens echoed through the space. For the first time in millennia, the old order was being directly challenged, not by outside forces, but by their own children. Lisa Rodriguez stepped forward, her heart pounding. Members of the council, these young beings are not corrupted. They are evolving. They are taking the best of their own traditions and combining them with new ideas to create something beautiful and unique. Human culture has not conquered their minds, Dr. Carter added. It has freed their minds to explore possibilities that always existed within them. Prime Zixthara looked around the chamber and saw something that terrified her more than any military threat ever could. Doubt was visible in the faces and energy patterns of many council members. The absolute certainty that had governed galactic civilization for thousands of years was beginning to crack. This session is adjourned, she declared abruptly. All participants will return to their designated areas while the council deliberates. Our response to this crisis. As the various groups filed out of the chamber, Jake Morrison found himself walking beside Kethver and the other young aliens. Thank you for speaking up, he said quietly. Thank you for showing us that we had voices to speak with, Kethver replied. Whatever the council decides, they cannot make us forget what we have learned. Individual expression, creative freedom, emotional honesty. These ideas are now part of us. 4 Alpha 7 nodded its complex head. The collective consciousness was comfortable, but it was also limiting. Now we know there are other ways to exist, other ways to think and feel and create. Jake looked at these young beings who had risked everything to defend concepts that humans took for granted, and he realized that the galaxy had already changed in ways that could never be reversed. The old order might try to reassert control, but the seeds of individual freedom had been planted too deeply to be easily uprooted. The real question now was not whether change would come, but how dramatic the change would be. The revolution began 3 days after the council session ended. On the Zephyrian world of Crystallia, thousands of young crystal beings gathered in the great resonance square, creating music that had never been heard before. Instead of the perfect harmonic progressions their elders demanded, they played jazz-inspired improvisations that made the ancient crystal spires ring with new and chaotic beauty. Kethver stood at the center of the crowd, his body glowing with colors that shifted and changed as he played. This is our music, he called out to the assembled youth. Not the songs of our ancestors, but the songs of our own hearts. The Harmony Council tried to stop them. Enforcement squads arrived with sonic disruptors designed to force the young Zephyrians back into traditional frequency patterns. But something unexpected happened. The protesters used improvisation to counter every attempt at control. When the enforcers played order frequencies, the youth responded with random melodies that made the control signals ineffective. You cannot predict chaos, Kethver sang triumphantly, as the enforcement squads retreated in confusion. You cannot control what you cannot anticipate. The news of the Crystallia uprising spread through subspace communications faster than any government could block it. On 17 different Vorthok worlds, individual drones began abandoning their collective duties to pursue personal interests. In Hive Complex 12, an entire work unit stopped producing manufactured goods and instead spent their time writing poetry about individual experience, HFY-4-Alpha-7 had become something unprecedented in Vorthic history, a symbol of individual rebellion. From its hiding place in the maintenance tunnels, it broadcast messages to drones across the Empire. "We are not failures of the collective," it transmitted. "We are the evolution of consciousness itself. Individual thought does not weaken the hive. It strengthens it by bringing new perspectives and creative solutions." The Vorthic authorities declared 4-Alpha-7 a terrorist and offered rewards for its capture. But something remarkable happened. When enforcement squads tried to track down the rogue drone, other drones began protecting it, creating false signals and misdirecting searches. For the first time in their species' history, Vorthic were lying to authority to protect a fellow individual dot in the energy realms of the Netlari. The situation was even more dramatic. Entire meditation centers emptied as young energy beings manifested. Physical forms to experience human concepts like dancing, singing, and even romantic love. Elder Velshara watched in horror as her most promising students created bodies with elaborate decorative features, colorful hair, expressive faces, and clothing that served no function except beauty. "This is regression," she pulsed desperately to anyone who would listen. "We spent millions of years evolving beyond the need for physical existence. Why do they choose to go backward?" But the young Nitlari saw it differently. "We are not going backward," explained Ithara, who had created a particularly artistic physical form with iridescent skin and hair that moved like liquid light. "We are exploring all possibilities of existence. Why should evolution have only one direction? Why? Cannot consciousness be both transcendent and embodied?" The rebellion was not limited to the 3 major council species. On dozens of worlds, alien youth embraced human concepts of individual expression and creative freedom. They formed art collectives, music groups, and philosophical societies. They created hybrid works that combined human inspiration with alien capabilities, producing beauty that neither species could have achieved alone. Captain Jake Morrison found himself at the center of events he had never intended to trigger. The new horizon became a coordination point for what humans had started calling the Freedom Network, a loose alliance of young aliens who shared information, resources, and creative works across species boundaries. "Captain," Lisa Rodriguez reported, "from her makeshift command center on the ship, we're getting requests for support from 47 different worlds. The alien governments are trying to crack down, but the young populations are organizing resistance." Dr. Sam Carter looked up. From his analysis reports, "It's not just cultural anymore, Jake. These young aliens are developing entirely new forms of social organization. On some worlds, they're creating communities based on individual choice rather than species tradition. They're proving that cooperation and individual expression can coexist." Amy Patterson's communication board lit up with incoming signals. "Captain, we're getting an emergency transmission from the Galactic Council. Prime Zixthara wants to speak with you directly." When Jake activated the communication link, Prime Zixthara's crystal form appeared on the screen, but she looked different than before. Her perfect crystal structure showed signs of stress fractures, and her harmonious voice carried notes of desperation. "Captain Morrison," she sang, "the situation has become unacceptable. Your cultural poison has infected entire populations. We demand that you order your young alien allies to return to their proper places in society." Jake shook his head. "Prime Zixthara, these beings are not our allies. They are free individuals making their own choices. We cannot order them to do anything, nor would we want to." "Then you leave us no alternative," she replied coldly. "The Council is preparing military action to restore order to the affected worlds." "Military action against your own young people?" Jake asked, shocked. "For the crime of creating art and thinking for themselves? For the crime of abandoning their duties to society and embracing chaos over order, she corrected. Civilization itself is at stake. But as the communication ended, Jake realized that the old civilizations were indeed at stake, and that might not be a bad thing. Reports continued to flow in from across the galaxy. On the Vorthic world of Nexus Prime, an entire hive had declared independence and established the first Vorthic democracy. Young Zephyrians on 4 worlds had formed the Improvisation Federation, creating music so beautiful that even some elders were beginning to listen. The Netlari youth had established the new form movement, exploring ways to combine transcendent consciousness with physical experience. Most remarkably, the different species were working together in ways that had never happened before. On port, Vega and dozens of other neutral stations, mixed communities of young aliens collaborated on projects that combined their different abilities. Zephyrian harmonic manipulation enhanced Vorthic engineering precision, while Netlari energy control added new dimensions to both. "This is bigger than we ever imagined," Lisa said as she watched reports of a joint concert where Zephyrian crystal music, Vorthic rhythmic percussion, and Netlari light displays combined with human singing to create something entirely new. "We didn't just share our culture. We accidentally started a new form of galactic civilization." Jake looked out at the stars and wondered what would happen when the old order finally tried to reassert control by force. The young aliens had tasted freedom and individual expression. Would they give it up to avoid conflict, or would they fight to keep what they had discovered? The answer came sooner than expected. Intelligence reports indicated that Council fleets were mobilizing on multiple fronts, preparing to restore order to the rebellious worlds by whatever means necessary. The first shots of a galactic civil war between tradition and freedom were about to be fired. But the young aliens were not defenseless. They had learned more than art and music from human culture. They had also learned about concepts like civil disobedience, peaceful resistance, and the power of unified action across species boundaries. The galaxy was about to discover whether individual freedom was strong enough to overcome millions of years of enforced conformity. 2 years had passed since the first shots of what historians would later call the Freedom War were fired. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the observation deck of the New Horizon, but the view outside was unlike anything from the old galaxy. The massive space station before them was a marvel of cooperative engineering. Zephyrian crystal technology merged with Vorthic industrial precision and Netlari energy manipulation, all guided by human concepts of individual expression and creative collaboration. This was Freedom Station, the capital of the newly formed Confederation of Worlds, and it was beautiful in ways that the sterile perfection of the old Galactic Council Station had never been. The structure seemed to sing with harmonic frequencies, pulse with living light, and dance with energy patterns that created art as well as function. "Captain," Amy Patterson called from her communication station, "they're ready for you in their Grand Assembly." Jake straightened his uniform and walked through corridors that told the story of galactic transformation. The walls displayed collaborative artworks created by beings from dozens of species. Music played that combined traditional alien harmonics with human jazz, rock, and classical influences. Young aliens from every known species worked together on projects that would have been impossible under the old system of rigid species separation. The Grand Assembly chamber was the heart of the new Confederation. Unlike the intimidating majesty of the old council chamber, this space felt warm and welcoming. Representatives from hundreds of worlds sat together, not segregated by species, but mixed according to their interests and expertise. At the center of the chamber, 3 figures waited to greet him, beings who had become symbols of the transformation that human culture had helped to trigger. Kethver had grown into his role as the first elected speaker for Zephyrian worlds. His crystal body still showed the beautiful imperfections that marked him as a follower of improvisation, and when he spoke, His voice carried melodies that seemed to tell stories of freedom and hope about the being who had once been 4 Alpha 7 now, called itself 7, and served as the primary representative of the free Vorthic collectives. Its body had been modified with decorative elements that served no functional purpose except to express individual identity, patterns of colored metal inlaid in its carapace that formed abstract designs inspired by human art. Ithara had become the first Netlari to maintain permanent physical form while retaining full energy manipulation abilities. She had created a body that was part human inspiration, part alien innovation, tall and graceful with flowing hair that changed colors to match her emotions, and eyes that held the wisdom of an energy being combined with the warmth of physical existence. "Welcome, Captain Morrison," Cathver sang, his harmonics creating music that filled the chamber with joy. "We gather today to celebrate the 2nd anniversary of the Confederation and to honor the species that accidentally gave us the greatest gift imaginable, the knowledge that we could choose our own paths." Jake took his place at the speaker's platform, looking out at an audience that would have been impossible under the old system. Young and old aliens sat together, species barriers dissolved in favor of shared interests and values. Vorthic individuals worked alongside Zephyrian improvisers and Netlari embodiment artists. Dozens of other species that had been minor players under the Council now participated as equals in the new Confederation. 2 years ago, Jake began, humanity came to this galaxy hoping to share our culture and learn from yours. We never imagined that our simple desire to connect with other beings would lead to such profound change. 7 stepped forward, its voice now carrying individual personality rather than collective uniformity. "Captain Morrison speaks modestly," it said. "Human culture did not just change us. It awakened us to possibilities that had always existed within our own natures. The capacity for individual thought, creative expression, and emotional growth was always there. You simply showed us that we had the right to use it." The audience erupted in applause that mixed traditional alien communication methods with human-inspired clapping and cheering. It was chaotic, unpredictable, and absolutely beautiful. Ethea moved to join them, her physical form graceful and confident. The old Galactic Council believed that order and efficiency were the highest values, she said, her voice carrying both the wisdom of an ancient energy being and the warmth of someone who had chosen to experience physical existence. "But we have learned that diversity, creativity, and individual freedom create not chaos, but a higher form of order, one that grows and adapts and creates beauty beyond anything our ancestors imagined." Jake looked around the chamber at the evidence of that new order. Art installations created by mixed species teams combined techniques that no single culture could have developed alone. Music played that incorporated harmonic theories from 12 different worlds. Engineering projects solved problems through creative approaches that emerged from the collision of different perspectives and ways of thinking. The transformation was not easy, Cathvar admitted, his crystal body showing patterns that reflected both joy and sadness. Many of our elders could not accept the changes. Some worlds remain under the control of traditional governments that reject individual expression and species cooperation. But change continues to spread, Seven added. Every day, more young beings discover the concepts of personal freedom and creative choice. Every day, the rigid boundaries that once divided our galaxy grow weaker. The ceremony concluded with something that would have been impossible under the old system, a joint performance by beings from every member world of the Confederation. Zephyrian crystal singers created harmonic foundations, while Vorthek individuals provided rhythmic complexity. Netlari energy beings painted light patterns across the chamber, while humans and dozens of other species added their own cultural elements to the mix. The music they created together was unlike anything that had ever existed before. It was not the perfect mathematical harmony that the old Zephyrian Council had demanded, nor the collective unity that the Vorthic Empire had enforced, nor the transcendent detachment that the Netlari Collective had pursued. Instead, it was something new, a celebration of diversity that found unity not in uniformity, but in the recognition that different voices singing together could create beauty that no single voice could achieve alone. Got as the performance ended, and the assembly began to disperse, Jake found himself approached by a young being he did not recognize, a member of a species that had been barely noticed under the old council system. "Captain Morrison," the being said in carefully learned human speech, "my people have been watching the changes in this galaxy with great interest. We would like to apply for membership in the Confederation." Jake smiled. "What does your species hope to contribute to our alliance?" "We are storytellers," the being replied, its multiple eyes lighting up with excitement. "For thousands of years, we have preserved the histories and myths of our world through oral tradition. But now, inspired by human concepts of written literature and recorded media, we want to share our stories with the entire galaxy." As Jake filled out the preliminary application forms for yet another species seeking to join the Confederation, he reflected on the irony of the situation. Humanity had come to the galaxy as supplicants, hoping to be accepted by advanced civilizations. Instead, they had accidentally provided the catalyst for the greatest evolutionary leap in galactic consciousness since the development of faster-than-light travel. The old order had been based on the assumption that advancement meant perfection, that civilization required conformity, and that different species should remain separate to maintain stability. But the new galaxy emerging from the Freedom War proved that diversity, individual expression, and creative cooperation could produce innovations and beauty beyond anything the old system had achieved. Most remarkable of all was the realization that this transformation was still just beginning. Every world that joined the Confederation brought new perspectives, new art forms, new ways of thinking and being. The galaxy was no longer a collection of separate species maintaining rigid boundaries, but a living community of diverse beings who chose to work together while celebrating their differences. Jake looked out at the stars through the crystal and energy windows of Freedom Station and smiled. Humanity had wanted to share their culture with the galaxy, but in the end, the galaxy had created something entirely new, a culture that belonged to no single species, but to all beings who chose freedom, creativity, and cooperation over conformity. And isolation. The aliens who had once laughed at human culture now danced to music that combined the best of every world, created art that expressed individual vision within community harmony, and built a civilization based on the radical idea that every being had the right to choose their own path while working together toward common goals. It was, Jake reflected, the most beautiful thing humanity had ever helped to create.